few people watching this might want to know what, in my opinion, is the best bang for your buck four-wheel drive. If you're asking yourself why you should care about my opinion, maybe you shouldn't. But I'll give you a little background history on me. I got a degree in automotive repair and was going to go into that field, but me and a friend of mine decided instead that we would start up a used car lot, because that way we could kind of pick and choose what vehicles we worked on. So, you know, we buy cars, fix them up, sell them, and we've been doing that for the past 4.5 years. We haven't been making much money doing it, but it's been a lot of fun experiencing all these different vehicles. You know, we buy a new car from the auction or something, and one of us will, you know, throw a plate on it and drive it for a week or two, put 300 or 400 miles on it, because usually we gotta wait before either the dealer we bought it from gives us the title and transferring things around. So usually there's about a 2-3 week delay there before we can actually put it up for sale. So that gives us time to get them fixed up, drive them around, experience them. So, you know, I've driven hundreds of cars over the past years, and so I have strong opinions on vehicles, and me and my business partner have a lot of discussions, and I thought maybe I would share some of my views with the internet. Alright, we'll talk about some of the vehicles that, basically my parameters for the best bang for your buck four-wheel drive is cheap, reliable, and good amount of aftermarket parts for, and easy to work on. That's a big one, because when you're you're going off-roading, especially if you're doing like the off-road parks where you're getting into more extreme stuff, you're going to break things, and you're not going to want to be having a vehicle that's such a pain to work on that it takes you a month to fix it before you can go back out. So, you know, something that's not going to break, and something that's, when it does, it won't be too hard to fix. So my first off-road vehicle was a 1997 Nissan Pathfinder. It was cheap, it was reliable, but it didn't have any aftermarket parts. And as far as like lift kits and stuff go, I mean, I found some of those plastic spacers, so you could do a spacer lift. But beyond that, I couldn't find much for it, and you know, I couldn't find any replacement parts. Like I bashed up my fender, and there was no junkyards in the area that had any of those, because they're pretty rare around here. So if I wanted a new fender, I'd have to buy one new. But the thing was getting pretty beat, so I just hammered out the old fender and kept on going. Also had that GMC Jimmy that was cheap. It was pretty reliable for the most part, but it did have its problems. But it's very difficult to work on. But parts are available to fix it. But there's not so much for, I mean, there's lift kits and stuff for it, but you're going to be playing around with torsion bars and stuff, and those things are very, in my opinion, difficult to work on, so that's not something I want to play around with. And there's other vehicles out there, like you could go for a Ford Explorer. I have one of those at the car lot we use as a plow truck. We have a little plow on it that was, I think, off a Jeep, and it works good for that. I think the earlier ones had the traction beam front suspension, so that'd be interesting, but that's not going to make my list. Things like Toyota 4Runners, those have a big problem with rusting out the frames, especially around here in Michigan. But if you live somewhere where they didn't salt the roads too much, you could get one of those, but they're outrageously expensive. There's a big following for those, so, you know, There's an auction website called Bring a Trailer, and I watch those go for, beyond $10,000, sometimes $20,000 for ones from the 90s. So they're up there in price, so it's not exactly cheap. Jeep Wranglers, again, they have problems with rusting out in the frames. And even if they are rusted out in the frames, they're still a lot of money, especially if you're trying to buy a TJ. So, maybe if you lived out somewhere down south or whatever, where you're out of the rust belt, you might not have an issue like that with rust. But around here, you can still pay $7,500 for one that, if it were any other vehicle, it'd be in the junkyard because it's so rusted out in the frame. But people still want money for them, so it's going to be difficult to get your value for money out of a Wrangler because they're so expensive, and you're going to end up buying one if you don't have a lot of money that's in pretty poor condition. So probably not the best option if you're trying to keep it cheap. So in my opinion, the best bang for your buck four-wheel drive is going to have to be the Jeep Grand Cherokees. The first and second generation, ZJ and WJ. The ZJ was made between 1993 and 1998, and then it was replaced by the WJ, which was made from 99 to 04. And both of them are quite similar. They're the ZJs, the earlier ones, you could get with most of them had the straight 6, but you could get them with a 5.3, or sorry, 5.2, the 318. And in '97, for a half year, they ran it a limited edition that had the 5.9, and we actually had one of those at the car lot. It was pretty cool. Their the biggest way you could tell them apart from the others is they had the hood louvers. So, and the WJ, which I think in general is a better vehicle because it has a nicer ride. It has doesn't seem to have quite as many electrical gremlins as these older ones do. And we've sold a lot of them at our car lot. We all sold for about $4,000. That seemed to be where they all sold, and they never gave us any issues. Although there are some inherent problems with the 99 to 04s with the engine. They had I believe it's the 0331. I'm not sure what the casting number was anymore, but the cylinder heads can crack. Although all the ones we've had, I've never really experienced that happening to us. So it's probably not that big of a deal. And all engines have some sort of a problem. But the older 4-liters, as far as I know, didn't really have any major problems like that. The heads didn't crack. I know the newer 4-liters had an issue, I heard, with something with the oil pump drive breaking and making you lose oil pressure, where the older ones didn't. But it's still probably your best option is to get one of these older ones or the second generation of that. You get the solid front axle, which is a big advantage. Not saying you can't go off-road with independent front suspension, because I've done it. And if you're just running like 31s, it's not going to hold you back too much. You can go anywhere anybody else can. A friend of mine, he always had a Wrangler, and I had my old Pathfinder, and we all went to the same places and did the same stuff. We all had 31s, it wasn't a problem. But the biggest thing is when you want to get, if you want to go further, because they're much easier to lift, because you're not, than an IFS vehicle, because you're not worried about putting your CVs on too big of an angle and having to get some sort of weird drop-down bracket for your little diff, and also you're not throwing off alignment angles. So it's just cheaper and easier to lift, to put bigger tires on. And then when you get more serious, that front end flex from that solid front axle is going to start coming into play, especially if you were doing rock crawling type stuff, Maybe not so much on just muddy trails and things, but if you're trying to climb up rocks, that definitely help you out. And it's just a huge aftermarket for it, and they're not that expensive. you could probably pick up a ZJ. They're getting hard to find in good shape. I managed to find this one pretty much rust free. Has about 150,000 miles, and bought it off my buddy for 800 bucks, which he bought it from the auction for 800 bucks and just never did anything with it. And the next generation, like, we were selling them for 4,000 bucks. You could probably find them on the private market if you're willing to go a little bit more rough condition, a little bit higher mileage for, probably pick one up for 1,500, 2,000 bucks if you knew how to work on cars yourself. Because if you're going to be buying a four-wheel drive and not know, or you're going to be buying any kind of car that's rough and cheap, but you don't know how to fix your car yourself, you're going to get taken by the auto shops. I mean, they talking 4 figures anymore, so you got to be careful with that. Even a simple brake job could cost you $1,500. So yeah, that's my winner, the Jeep Grand Cherokees. I'm not saying it's the best four-wheel drive in the world, because if you're talking about modifying anything, it could be anything. But as far as bang for your buck, I don't see how you go wrong with a Jeep Grand Cherokee.